The walls felt too white, not clean, sterile. Like even the paint knew this wasn't a place for comfort. The doctor sat across from me, a clipboard in his lap, pretending to reread what he already knew. He wasn't buying time for himself. He was giving me mine. I didn't take it. "Mr. Reed," he said, finally lifting his eyes. The results came back. I didn't nod. I didn't ask. I just waited. There are moments when words aren't information, they're confirmation. He spoke carefully, like he'd rehearsed it. "You're not the biological father." That was the line. The before and after. Everything I'd believed, everything I'd built, shifted in that instant. But I didn't break. Not yet. Through the glass wall, I could see the infant wing. One of the nurses adjusted a blanket over a crib, the crib with her in it. Willa James. Swaddled, still, face as calm as the day was long. A tiny miracle that had nothing to do with me. She didn't look like me. Not in the way babies sometimes echo their parents in nose bridges or ear shapes. She looked like a stranger's dream. But even then, I tried to believe. I convinced myself maybe the resemblance skipped a generation. Maybe love could override biology. It couldn't. I walked back to the room, the envelope already burning in my coat pocket. I'd brought it with me when I first suspected. Not because I expected this, but because I knew I might need it. Delaney was sitting upright in the hospital bed, phone in hand, scrolling like none of this mattered. Her hair was perfect, lip gloss unbothered. There wasn't a single sign of guilt on her. "You heard?" she asked, not even looking up. I didn't answer. Just pulled out the envelope and dropped it on the blanket near her feet. "What's this?" "Every dollar," I said. "Prenatal visits. Custom nursery furniture. Diapers in bulk. The mural you insisted on. The hospital suite. Even the personalized bracelet with her initials." She opened the flap and pulled out the first page. Her eyebrows twitched, just enough to register it. Money was her pressure point. I knew it. She knew I knew it. She folded the papers without reading more. "You're really making this dramatic." I stepped closer. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She's not mine. Which means none of this is. She smiled, lazy and sharp. "You're good with numbers, Silas. Not so much with feelings." That was her way out. Always had been. Minimize. Redirect. Rewrite the scene before it settled. I didn't stay to argue. There was nothing to win. Out in the hallway, the world kept moving. A man passed by with balloons and a grin. A woman clutched a baby carrier, tears of joy still fresh on her cheeks. Everyone else was starting a story. Mine had just ended. I didn't go home. Couldn't. Home meant shared closets and hollow walls. I found a motel across town with paper-thin curtains and a flickering ice machine. Paid cash. Asked for a room at the end of the hall. Inside, I sat on the bed with my jacket still on. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Just breathed. In and out. Slow. Controlled. Like I was keeping something inside from spilling everywhere. She let me build a life around a child that wasn't mine. Let me dream about bike rides, Christmas pajamas, pancakes on weekends. She let me choose names, argue over middle initials, paint stars on the ceiling of a nursery I'd never use. And now she wanted to act like I was the one being unreasonable. There are betrayals that stab, and there are betrayals that bury you alive. Delaney didn't just cheat. She let me love a lie. Later, my phone buzzed. A message from her. No apology. Just 4 words. "Don't be so dramatic." That's when I blocked her. There was no need for another word between us. No need for more damage control. Only the quiet hum of a motel fan and the reality settling in. My world hadn't shattered. It had been rewritten. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure who I was in it anymore. But I knew one thing. This wasn't over. It was just the start. The motel room smelled like bleach and old air. One of those places where everything felt wiped down but never clean. I sat on the edge of the bed long after the sun had disappeared behind the blinds, not tired, just emptied. There's a difference. The silence wasn't peaceful, it buzzed. Not with sound, but with weight. Every second felt like it was trying to crush me into the mattress. I tried to remember when I'd first felt something was wrong. Not the obvious moment with the test results. That was the explosion. I mean the tremors before it. The soft warnings I ignored. There were signs, of course. There always are. She started turning her phone face down. Started saying she needed space to focus on the pregnancy. Thursday nights became sacred for her yoga class, and God help me, I believed her. She said it helped her connect to the baby. She was glowing, after all. Isn't that what they say about expecting mothers? But it wasn't glow. It was guilt polished to a shine. I remember the weekend trip she took with the girls. A wellness retreat in the mountains. She showed me stock photos from the spa website and laughed when I offered to come. "You'd hate it," she said. "It's all mud masks and juice cleanses." I paid for the whole thing. Later, in that motel room, I opened my banking app and went through the charges again. There it was, the Driftwood Retreat and Spa. Full weekend. Couples package. 2 guests. She didn't even try to hide it. She was so sure I'd never question her, so confident I'd stay in my lane, responsible, dependable, dull. I was the one who scheduled appointments, paid bills on time, picked up prenatal vitamins without being asked. She knew exactly what kind of man I was. And she used that like a tool. No, not a tool. A shield. Because women like Delaney don't just lie. They curate. They design a version of reality so carefully that when it finally cracks, you feel like the fool for not noticing sooner. I stood up and paced the room, hands in my pockets. My fingers brushed the receipt from the custom crib. Walnutwood. Hand-carved name. Willa James in cursive across the side rails. The irony choked me. The name was her idea. She said she wanted something classic but modern. I didn't argue. I liked how excited she got talking about it. Every detail was a performance, and I paid for front row seats. Only now I realized I wasn't the audience. I was the prop. It wasn't just betrayal. It was investment fraud. She sold me on a future she'd never planned to deliver. And what stung the most wasn't even the baby. It was that I loved someone who never really existed. The version of her I held on to, warm, funny, real, was a sketch drawn in my imagination. She just smiled and let me color it in. A gust of wind pushed against the thin window pane. Somewhere outside, someone laughed. A deep laugh. A man's. That did it. I grabbed my keys and left the room. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't breathe inside those 4 walls. I drove without music. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and the occasional rattle in the dashboard. I ended up outside the house. My house. The one I painted for a family that never existed. I didn't go in. I just sat across the street and stared at the front porch where we once put pumpkins and Christmas lights and those stupid fake tulips she liked in the spring. The porch light was on. She was home. Probably inside, probably asleep, probably dreaming with someone else's voice in her head. I should have been angrier. I should have wanted to smash something. But all I felt was done. It was like watching a movie I used to love but now couldn't sit through. I knew the ending, and I hated every second of how we got there. I stayed until the porch light flicked off. Then I turned the key and drove away. Back at the motel, I didn't go back to bed. I just sat at the small desk by the window, pulled a notepad from the drawer, and wrote one sentence at the top. She didn't break me. Below that, I added another. But I'm going to build something she'll never be part of. And then, for the first time since the hospital, I breathed without shaking. The front door clicked open with the same familiar sound, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Nothing did. I stepped inside slowly, like I didn't want the house to know I was back. The air smelled wrong. Too clean. Like someone had tried to erase something in a hurry. Citrus disinfectant and cheap floral spray, clinging to every corner. The living room was spotless. Furniture lined up like showroom pieces. Not a single cushion out of place. Even the candles were lit, which made no sense. Delaney hated wasting them. That alone told me something had shifted. I moved through the house like a detective at a crime scene. Every room was too perfect, too curated. The kind of clean that doesn't come from routine, but from fear. Fear of being found out. When I got to the bedroom, it hit me in the gut. The wedding photo that had sat on the dresser for years, gone. In its place, a framed print of wildflowers. One she used to say was tacky. I walked closer. Something buzzed in my ears. Not sound, just pressure. Behind the door, hanging on the rack, was a shirt. Not mine. Expensive brand. Bigger size. Still smelling faintly of cologne. That smell you recognize even when it doesn't belong. I pulled it down slowly. Checked the tag. Nothing helpful. Just a confirmation that it wasn't mine. Then I reached under the bed, where we used to keep winter blankets. There it was. A duffel bag. Partially zipped, like someone had planned to leave but hadn't gotten around to it. Inside, running shoes, a stick of deodorant, a phone charger, a silver chain with a small pendant. Delaney always called those things tacky, said they looked like discount accessories from a gas station. But clearly, she didn't mind them on him. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the chain in my hand, letting the weight of it settle. There was no more guessing. No more maybe. This wasn't a suspicion. It was a confirmation. Physical, undeniable. She hadn't just cheated. She'd nested with someone else. Right here. In this house. In our bed. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The shirt. The chain. The bag. Not for court. Not for revenge. For me. So when I started questioning reality again, when nostalgia crept in dressed as forgiveness, I'd have proof. I'd have clarity. Then I heard it. The front door. I froze. Stood up. Seconds later, I heard her voice. Light, distracted, mid-conversation on the phone. And then she stepped into the room, wearing someone else's hoodie, holding a smoothie in one hand like it was just another day. She saw me, blinked once. No gasp. No panic. Just that detached tone she used when she didn't want to fight. Oh, she said. Didn't know you were back. I stood still, stared at her like she was someone I'd never met. You're disgusting, I said. She rolled her eyes like I'd accused her of stealing groceries. Don't be dramatic. And that, right there, was the last thread. The final line in a chapter one hadn't even wanted to write. Who is he? I asked. She didn't flinch. What does it matter? You're out of this now. I laughed once. Dry. Bitter. You let me believe that baby was mine. Let me build her world from scratch. You even named her after someone in my family. She dropped her keys on the counter with a careless clatter. Because you're stable. You're dependable. You handle the boring parts, bills, schedules, doctor visits. But you were never really present. You never felt like a husband. I stared at her. You're justifying cheating with an Excel spreadsheet? She sipped her smoothie. Looked bored. He made me feel alive. You made me feel like a utility bill. And that's when it all went quiet in my head. No yelling. No chaos. Just silence. And focus. I walked over to the fridge. Opened it. Pulled out a bottle of sparkling wine I'd bought months ago. It was supposed to be for the day we brought the baby home. A celebration. A beginning. I popped the cork. Let the foam spill into the sink. Then poured the rest down the drain without a word. She watched. Is that your big revenge? She asked, half laughing. I closed the fridge. No, I said. That's just the warning shot. Then I left her standing there. And for the first time, I felt the beginning of something that wasn't pain. It was purpose. There's a certain kind of anger that doesn't roar. It calculates. Back at the motel, I sat cross-legged on the floor with my laptop balanced on a suitcase. The room smelled like old linens and fried food from the diner below. Outside, some engine kept coughing like it couldn't quite start. But inside, I was laser-focused. Delaney used my computer sometimes. We had a shared email account we created when we were picking out baby gear registries, delivery updates, coupons for cribs. She said it was easier that way. Less clutter. Convenience has a cost. She was never great at changing passwords. I tried the first one I remembered, her birth year and initials. It worked. The inbox looked clean. Suspiciously clean. Nothing recent. I dug deeper, old folders, hidden tags, anything that didn't fit. Then I found one. Tucked under a renamed archive folder, wellness receipts. I clicked. Inside were messages. Lots of them. Most from the same name, Rhett Lawson. Emails. Forwarded messages. Booking confirmations. A PDF itinerary for a spa weekend that included a couple's massage. Photos, selfies taken in hotel robes, champagne in hand. Her face was all smile. His was the smug kind that made you want to punch the screen. And then there was the worst one. An email from her to him, sent a few weeks before the baby was born. Subject, almost done pretending. Body. He still thinks it's his. Signed the paternity form without blinking. Just a few more days and we're free. His reply was shorter. Don't worry. That idiot wouldn't know the truth if it slapped him in the face. That idiot. That was me. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the screen. Not blinking. Not thinking. Just absorbing. They knew. The whole time. They laughed behind my back while I painted the nursery. They made jokes while I cried over name ideas. They called me a fool while I held her hair when she was sick from morning nausea. This wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. I copied everything. Every email. Every screenshot. Every receipt. Then I opened a new folder and labeled it for HR. Delaney and Rhett worked at the same company, Evelyn Strategies. She was a senior project manager. He was her direct report. Company policy, clearly outlined in their handbook, prohibited any undisclosed relationships between supervisors and subordinates, especially ones that affected travel, budgets, or team dynamics. Guess who signed off on those spa reimbursements? I wrote a clean cover note. No emotion. No accusations. Just facts. Attached every file, every timestamp, every instance of misconduct. Then I created a new email address. No name, no trace, just a line in the from field, concern.thirdparty@protonmail.com. I addressed it to the company's HR director and copied the general ethics inbox. I didn't ask for follow-up, didn't leave a signature, just sent it. It was done. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like clarity. For days, I've been drowning in noise, memories, pain, the echo of her voice trying to make my sanity seem like overreaction. Now, there was stillness. Not peace, but something close. I lay on the motel bed and stared at the ceiling until my eyes blurred. I didn't dream. Or maybe I did. But if so, I don't remember it. The next morning, I checked my phone. Blocked numbers. No new messages. But then, a single line in my inbox from a disposable account I'd set up for responses. Subject, report received. No body. No signature. Just confirmation. It had landed. They were reading. And that meant Delaney's perfect little tower was starting to sway. It was a small step, but it was the first one I'd taken for me. Not to fix. Not to save. To move forward. And I wasn't done. Not even close. The office didn't have windows. Just white walls, a gray desk, and the kind of chair you sit in when you know the conversation won't be emotional, it'll be surgical. Across from me sat Marin Blake. No small talk. No fake empathy. Just focus. She flipped through the folder I'd brought, printed emails, receipts, a timeline I'd put together with more precision than I'd used on any financial spreadsheet in my life. When she reached the final page, she looked up. "You were used," she said, flatly. I nodded. "But you documented everything. That gives us power." I liked the way she said us. Not you. Not this case. Us. Like I wasn't alone in this anymore. "I'm not interested in revenge," I said. "I just want clarity. Consequences." She leaned back in her chair and crossed one leg over the other. "You want legal clarity, emotional distance, financial protection, career shielding." "Exactly. Can we do that?" I asked. "With what you've brought?" "Absolutely." I felt something tighten in my chest, then release. Not relief. Not yet. But the early version of it. She continued. "The first thing we do is send her a notice. Not legal action yet, just a declaration of intention. You are not the biological father. You are not financially responsible. Any attempts to claim otherwise will be met with litigation." "And him?" I asked. She gave a small, satisfied smile. "Mr. Lawson's already out of a job. The HR department moved fast once they saw your file. But if you want to go deeper, we can. Emotional fraud, conspiracy, defamation, if they start twisting the story." "Will they?" She nodded slowly. "Almost certainly. She'll paint you as unstable, distant, cold. She'll cry. She'll perform. And people will believe her. Until they don't." I breathed out through my nose. "Then let's get ahead of it." Marin nodded once and opened her laptop. "I'll draft the formal declaration. You'll receive a copy. And I'll handle all direct communication with her moving forward." "I don't want to speak to her again," I said. "You won't have to." I left her office with no dramatic music, no fist pump moment of justice. Just quiet steps on a tiled hallway and the sound of the door clicking shut behind me. But for the first time since everything broke apart, I felt like I was walking forward, not crawling through the wreckage. Back at the motel, my phone lit up. For messages. 3 from blocked numbers. 1 from a name I hadn't seen since the hospital, Sloan. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I turned off notifications entirely. Let the world shout into silence. Later, I received a call from Marin. "She's been informed," she said. "No response yet. But give it time." "I don't need a response," I told her. "I need space." "You'll have it." That night, I went for a walk. No destination. Just movement. Each step felt like letting go of something I didn't realize I was holding. Guilt. Confusion. The illusion of responsibility for someone else's lie. I ended up near the river. The water moved slow and steady, the kind of current that doesn't look dangerous until you're in it. I stood at the edge and let the cold air wrap around me. And for a second, I thought, she could have stopped at any time. She could have told me the truth. Even once. But she didn't. Not when I painted the nursery. Not when I picked out lullabies. Not when I held her hand during the ultrasound and cried because I thought I saw our child smile. She let me fall in love with a life she never intended to share. And now? Now I would reclaim mine. Not by hurting her, by removing her from the picture entirely. That was the difference. She fought dirty. I would fight clean and still win. She waited outside the motel. Not in a car. Not hiding. On the bench across from the main entrance. Hoodie up, eyes down, hands fidgeting with something, maybe keys, maybe her sleeve. As I stepped out with my duffel bag over my shoulder, she stood. "Silas," she said, voice low. Not soft, restrained. Like she was choosing every syllable carefully. I didn't stop walking. "I just need 1 minute." I didn't answer. Just kept my pace until I reached the edge of the parking lot. Then I paused, turned halfway, arms crossed. "You don't get to ask for time now." She flinched, barely. "I know I hurt you. I'm not here to defend myself." I gave a short laugh. "Since when?" Sloan looked down, then back at me. "I wanted to tell you the truth. So many times. But every time you smiled at me, or held my hand, or talked about our future, I couldn't do it." "That wasn't love," I said. "That was cowardice." She didn't argue. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "But I need you to understand. Rhett, he wasn't a plan. It just happened. And then it kept happening." I stepped back. "Don't try to make him sound like a side note. You built a life with him behind my back. You let me carry dreams you knew would collapse. And now you want what? Closure?" "No," she whispered. "I want you to hear me before you erase me." I shook my head slowly. "I already did." I turned to leave. But before I could walk away, she said something I didn't expect. "He's gone." That stopped me. Not out of sympathy, but out of instinct. The kind that kicks in when someone drops a live wire at your feet. "What do you mean, gone?" The moment things got messy at work, he disappeared. Blocked my number. Cleaned out his desk. I haven't heard from him since the report hit HR. I almost smiled. Guess he wasn't in this for the long haul. She didn't react. "I was stupid," she said. "But I didn't do it to ruin you." "No," I replied. "You did it to feel something. And you didn't care who paid the price." I left her there. Standing still. No yelling. No crying. Just the quiet sinking of a person realizing they burned a bridge with no boat on the other side. Back at the motel, I expected to feel better. I didn't. Truth is, I didn't want her pain. I just didn't want to carry mine anymore. Later, I opened my laptop again. Marin had sent over updates. HR at Evelyn had launched a full internal audit. Rhett was officially terminated. Sloan was under temporary suspension. There would be hearings. But then Marin added something else. "We found another detail you'll want to see." Attached was a screenshot from an internal email between Rhett and Sloan. It was dated the week before the paternity test. He signed the form. No questions. "Can't believe he's still this blind." Sloan. Rhett's reply. "Told you. Just keep smiling. He thinks you're still his." It wasn't just cheating. It was mockery. A script written behind closed doors. A performance I wasn't even cast in. I was just the funding. I stared at the messages until my eyes burned. I thought I'd already felt the worst of it. But somehow, this was deeper. Not only had they planned it, they'd laughed about it. I forwarded the messages to Marin with a short note. "Add this to the file. I want nothing left unsaid." She replied within minutes. "Understood." "And Silas? You're handling this with more strength than most ever could." Strength. Funny word. It didn't feel like strength. It felt like cold steel pressing into old wounds. But I was still standing. Still breathing. And that would have to be enough for now. The folder was thick by now. Printed emails, timestamps, screenshots, phone records, transaction logs. A timeline of betrayal curated down to the hour. I laid it all out on the bed like evidence at a trial. Not to convince a jury. To remind myself, this happened. This wasn't in my head. Every time I hesitated, I looked at the messages. The ones where they called me blind. Where they joked about how easy I was to manipulate. Where they stripped my role down to useful, but slow. That's what finally pushed me past doubt. I scanned everything into a clean PDF, added a cover page summarizing each violation of company policy, and sent it again, this time directly to the corporate ethics board. No burner account. No anonymity. My name at the bottom. No more hiding. No more fear. I wasn't the one who should be ashamed. That same afternoon, I got the response from Marin. Final update from HR. Sloan, disciplinary hearing scheduled. Probation likely to become termination. Rhett, contract voided, reference suspended, barred from future rehiring. Your file is closed. No further action required on your part. I stared at that message for a long time. Not out of satisfaction, but out of stillness. There was no high. No adrenaline rush. Just quiet. I told the truth. And now the world was beginning to believe it. That evening, I got a message from an unknown number. "You've gone too far." No name, but I didn't need one. I knew the voice behind it. I didn't respond. Let her sit with the silence. But the next day, she found another way in. A friend request. A story post. A vague quote in white script on a black background. "The worst betrayals come from those who pretend to love you." Classic move. Cast herself as the victim. Let the crowd fill in the blanks. Cue the sympathy text from people who didn't know better. Maybe one or two old friends who still followed her out of habit. I didn't care. I didn't even feel the urge to correct the record. Because truth, left alone long enough, speaks for itself. I blocked the account and deleted the app entirely. No more watching. No more checking. Let her stage her little drama for an audience I no longer belonged to. I went outside instead. Walked to the small cafe on the corner near the motel. Ordered coffee. Sat at the window. Watched a mother and child pass by. Not my child. Not our child. Just a stranger's quiet happiness. And I didn't ache this time. I just watched. Back in the room, Marin called again. Her voice was calm as always. Professional. Grounded. "We've closed the file on our end," she said. "No civil liability for you. No paternal obligation. No financial trail she can exploit. You're protected." I let that sink in. "What happens to her now?" I asked. "She'll lose her position. Reputation might take a hit. Depends on how hard she leans into the victim narrative. Some people will believe her. Others won't." And Rhett, already a ghost, burned his exit too fast. There's a paper trail now. He won't work in corporate again for a long while. Silence stretched for a second. Then she said, "You did well, Silas. You didn't overreach. You didn't get dirty. You just made sure the truth landed where it needed to. Was it enough?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "It's enough to move on." After the call, I sat on the floor. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just breathed. The hardest part about truth isn't telling it. It's surviving it. Now that I had to, I realized something. I didn't want revenge anymore. I just wanted peace. The lease was short, the apartment smaller than anything I'd lived in for years. But it was mine. No shared closets. No traces of someone else's perfume in the curtains. No rooms that remembered lies. I moved everything in with 4 boxes and a borrowed truck. Left behind the rest, the heavy furniture, the dream home pieces we picked out when we were still pretending to be a team. I didn't want any of it. There's a freedom in starting from nothing. Every item in the new place had to earn its spot. No ghosts. No guilt. I filled the shelves with books I hadn't read in years. Set a potted plant by the window just to see something alive. Bought a cheap coffee maker that made the place smell like mornings I used to dream about. The first night, I slept straight through. No dreams. No jolts awake. Just rest. And that, in its own quiet way, felt like a miracle. I started running again. At first, it was clumsy. My legs hated me. My lungs burned. But each step scrubbed away a little more of the weight. Anger, shame, confusion, sweat carried it out. I didn't run from anything anymore. I ran into the person I was becoming. I stopped checking my phone. Stopped rehearsing conversations I'd never have. Stopped imagining what I'd say if she showed up at my door. She wasn't coming, and I didn't want her to. People asked questions, sure. Some friends from before, some coworkers who heard pieces of the story in whispers. I didn't offer details. Just a version of the truth I could live with. It didn't work out. She wasn't who I thought she was. And that was enough. Because I wasn't trying to defend myself anymore. I wasn't trying to make anyone pick sides. I was just trying to live. There was a bench in a nearby park that became mine. I'd sit there after runs, drink water, watch dogs chase tennis balls like it was the purpose of life. One afternoon, a little girl passed by on a scooter. Her dad jogged a few steps behind, laughing as she wobbled and corrected course. I didn't feel pain. I felt hope. Not for what could have been, but for what might be someday on my own terms. One evening, I cleaned out the last moving box. At the bottom, tucked between some notebooks, I found a bracelet. Leather band. Metal plate. 2S. Always. I stared at it for a while. Didn't cry. Didn't sigh. I just walked it down to the lobby, left it on the free table, and wrote a note. For someone ready to start over. Back upstairs, I opened the notebook I'd been writing in since the fallout began. First pages were rough. Rage, confusion, a sense of collapse. But now? Now it looked different. 1 line per day. Honest. Clear. Today, I didn't look back. Today, I laughed without guilt. Today, I ran further than I thought I could. It wasn't a story about loss anymore. It was a story about motion. Not heroic, not cinematic, just real. In the middle of all this, I met people. New ones. People who didn't know the before. I got invited to dinner by neighbors. Sat in backyards with plastic cups of wine and dogs sniffing at my shoes. One night, a woman named Claire talked to me about books for nearly an hour. We didn't flirt. We didn't push. We just talked. And that felt more valuable than anything I'd felt in months. Not because she might be something, but because I might be. I came home that night and wrote. Today, I didn't feel broken. Just open. The past still knocks sometimes. Old photos, old thoughts, questions that had no clean answers. But now, I let them come. And I let them pass. Because that's what healing sounds like. Not silence, but the decision not to answer every ghost that comes knocking. I didn't notice when exactly it happened. Maybe it was the morning I woke up without dread. Or the evening I came home and didn't think of what used to be here. Or maybe it was when someone said her name in passing and I didn't feel my chest tighten. But at some point, the fire burned out. And all that was left was quiet. Not emptiness. Just space. I filled it slowly. Not with distractions, not with replacements, but with me. My time. My pace. My choices. I started cooking again, not because I had to, but because the act of preparing something just for myself felt like care I hadn't given in a long time. I bought a used bike, rode it through side streets and along the river trail. There were no memories on those roads, no shared moments baked into the sidewalks. Just movement, just breath. The apartment began to feel like home, not because of furniture, because of the things I did inside it. I read more, slept better, made music playlists for no one but me. The notebook, now worn and dog-eared, had reached its final pages. I flipped to the back cover and reread a few entries. The past knocked. I didn't answer. The quiet doesn't scare me anymore. I can be whole and alone. That one stuck with me the most. Because it was true. I wasn't waiting for someone to fill the silence anymore. I was learning to own it. A few messages still trickled in. Friends of hers. Mutual acquaintances. People who wanted a version of the story they could understand. I gave them none, because the truth doesn't need an audience, and healing doesn't need validation. One afternoon, I passed the old neighborhood. I hadn't planned it. The route just happened to curve that way. For a moment, I debated taking a different turn, but I didn't. I drove past the house. The lawn was overgrown. New car in the driveway. Different curtains. I didn't slow down. Didn't stare. It was someone else's problem now. Back home, I did laundry. Made dinner. Watered the plant by the window. And that night, while folding clothes, I found a small envelope in the back of the drawer. No name. No markings. Inside, one last letter. Her handwriting. I didn't remember keeping it. I sat for a while, the weight of the paper in my hand. Then I walked it outside, dropped it in the building's fireplace, and watched it curl and vanish. No words needed. That was my final page. A few weeks later, I ran into Claire again, the one from the backyard conversation. She asked if I wanted to join their book club. No pressure. I said yes. Not because I was ready for something new, but because I was finally done being defined by something old. That night, I opened a new notebook. Blank. Clean. Crisp pages. On the first line, I wrote, I survived the fire, and I learned to build from ash. Then I closed the cover. Not because the story was over, because the next one was waiting to begin.